The wind blew hard that October night in 1933, cutting through the alleys of Little Italy like a blade. The streetlights flickered off and on, their glow reflecting off the slippery cobblestones, as if afraid to stay in one place for too long. On a narrow street near Mulberry Street, a priest whispered Latin to himself, clutching a leather-bound book as he walked faster, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. He wouldn't come home that night. Witnesses, only two, claimed to have seen something that moved like smoke, but cast no shadow. One, an elderly butcher, said it had a fedora, but no face. The other, a newspaper vendor, swore he heard whispers in Italian echoing within brick walls. The priest's body was never found, but what they found inside his chapel days later, an inverted crucifix, wilted lilies, and a small piece of tarnished ivory carved from a Sicilian skull, was enough to chill the blood of even the most hardened New Yorker. Who was watching Father Mancini, and why did his disappearance echo the structure of an ancient Sicilian ritual murder, last carried out in 1791? In the 1930s, New York was a city of dreams and despair. Millions flocked to Ellis Island, seeking opportunity in a land supposedly paved with gold. But beneath the din of jazz bars and newsstands, another rhythm beat softly, the heartbeat of La Mano Nera, the Black Hand. One of the earliest incarnations of what would become the Mafia, the Black Hand had its roots in southern Italy, where whispered curses were as deadly as bullets. They brought their rituals across the Atlantic, incorporating their codes not only into crime, but also into belief systems, blood oaths, protective talismans, and invocations to saints with double names, St. Jude the Apostle, or San Giuda Maledetto, the Accursed. In ancient Sicilian tradition, shadows could take human form if hatred or pain were strong enough. Stories passed down in dark kitchens spoke of betrayed shadow, the betrayed shadow, a spirit born when someone is unjustly killed by their own bloodline. These shadows would not disappear until a truth was revealed or revenge was fulfilled. Little Italy was no stranger to such stories. Every building had eyes, every alley had whispers, and in this intertwined world of omerta and superstition, one thing was certain: not everyone who disappears stays missing. In 1946, a historian named Carmine Elio discovered something surprising. Deep in the archives of the Archdiocese of New York, he found a leather ledger from the 1930s titled Il Libro Nero, the Black Book. Inside were lists of names, but not church members. Instead, they appeared to be individuals linked to the Mafia, each accompanied by a date, a place, and a symbol, a crucifix, a knife, or a black sun. And then, silence. Elio died weeks after the discovery. A stroke, they said, but the last entry in his diary, handwritten and torn mid-sentence, read, "These aren't stories. The shadows are real, and one of them is standing still." The page ends there. Residents began reporting strange sightings near the Cathedral of the Most Precious Blood. A man in a pinstripe suit, his face obscured, would pace back and forth at midnight, reciting prayers in Italian. Each time he appeared, something had happened that week. A relic would disappear, a former mobster would turn up dead, or the air would smell faintly of burnt olive oil and old wine. A former assassin in witness protection once told an NYU professor during an interview in the 1980s, "Have you ever felt watched in this part of town? It's because you are. Someone, or something, watches over the ancient codes. If you break them, you pay, even if you're already dead." Cut to present-day New York. TikTok videos are now circulating under the hashtag #MafiaGhostsNY, with users claiming to have filmed shadowy figures moving unnaturally through the alleys of Little Italy. One clip, now with 6.7 million views, shows what appears to be a man in 1930s attire crashing into a brick wall and disappearing. Another captures a distorted whisper in Italian, "Confess or I die. Confess or die." Tour companies now offer Ghosts of the Five Families walking tours, promising stories of haunted tunnels beneath Manhattan, cursed cellars, and sacred statues that bleed red during certain lunar cycles. And on the hit HBO show Crimson Code, inspired by real mafia stories, there is an episode called The Watcher in the Fedora, which eerily mirrors the priest's 1933 disappearance and includes a replica of Il Libro Nero. But here's the problem. The episode aired before the priest's case was even publicly declassified in 2011. So who told them the story? Is this an artistic coincidence? Or are shadows still seeping into our culture from somewhere much older and much darker? And just when you think it's safe to turn your back on the past, we turn our backs. Because while New York may have its fedora-wearing mafia ghosts and shadows, Oregon hides something far more insidious. Pioneer towns long buried by time and moss hold their own secrets. Children born with second sight in Prairie City, a church bell that rings only during eclipses, and journal entries from 1867 warning, "Do not go west beyond the ridge. The watchers live there." Then, who is really watching you? The spirits of the blood-soaked brotherhoods in New York, or the restless dead of Oregon's haunted frontiers? Before we travel Oregon's ghost-infested trails, what you think? Have you ever felt watched on a quiet street at night? Do you believe that a shadow can carry resentment through generations? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your ghost stories too. And if you're still reading, you're already part of the mystery. Sign up to follow the trail through states, centuries, and superstitions. We're just getting started. Fog descended heavily on the old trail connecting Baker City to Prairie City in mid-19th century Oregon, blurring the outlines of the trees and turning the air into a chilly sigh between the centuries-old trunks. In 1867, the region was already pulsating with the frenzy of pioneers, carrying wagons and hopes toward the Wild West, while dozens of families settled, building homes, sawmills, and post-hewn churches in a landscape as promising as it was hostile. The sound of axes against wood echoed constantly, punctuated by the distant howls of wolves, animals seen as harbingers of the danger lurking in the woods. Among these pioneers was Jessica Caldwell, a figure who became a legend even before her death. Jessica arrived with her husband and 2 children in 1865 and soon gained fame for her vivid dreams. She dreamed of a pale, staring man who watched her from the clearing and constantly whispered her name. At first, she believed it was a preview of the wild, but the visions intensified. The mute man raised his hands, and behind him, other shadows appeared, wearing strangely shaped garments, like shiny hooves or circular hoops on their heads, their mouths mute in the wind. Jessica recorded everything in a leather-bound journal, describing sounds as she perceived them. A hiss like thin metal, a cracking sound, the echo of an iron strike. On certain nights, the hissing sound would transform into a chorus of meaningless voices, and her hands, according to the notes, seemed to know secret paths in the dark, tracing invisible maps that she believed communicated with another world. In April 1867, she wrote, "I felt something, as if the earth were breathing for me now. All we were was observed. They come and tell our sins to the trunks of the redwoods." In the spring of that same year, 2 children disappeared near the trail. Their parents claimed they had only strayed a few meters, but they were never found again. No trace, no trail, as if the ground had swallowed their footprints. Locals began to swear that on nights with a new moon, someone, or something, would capture human attention and drag them into the forest, leaving no trail. Some reported something larger than any local animal, so tall it seemed to touch the treetops, and so silent it didn't need to make a sound to instill fear. Several residents claimed to have heard the Gilar chapel bell ring at odd hours, or at least felt a distant metallic tone resonate in their chests, even though no physical bell exists anymore. The church had been abandoned in 1872 when a mysterious fire consumed its interior. Still, former members of the community report hearing the bell toll 8 hours a day, 2 weeks before one of the bodies disappeared. They claim, when the bell rings, it's a sign that someone is being rescued. Jessica moved to Roseburg in 1870 after suffering a nervous breakdown, but left behind diaries, letters, and curious objects. A small bronze hourglass, which she said stopped repeatedly on its own, a stack of index cards with symbols drawn in red chalk, and a cross carved into a sliver of wood, with scratched signs resembling runes. The oldest diary contained a warning in large letters. They walk where the secret of the living and the dead hovers, and exchange names with the earth. Decades later, the Prairie City Museum received these objects. Historians tried to connect the symbols to the region's native cultures, Cayuse, Umatilla, Pandorei, but nothing matched. An anthropologist who studied the instruments commented, "I've never seen anything like it. No reading would call it writing," and she claimed she read that language. To her, it spoke to her. After the anthropologist's mysterious death, a safe with 5 unmarked keys was kept at the museum. It was never opened. Fast forward to the 20th century, and stories of ghost riders, rogue pilots who disappeared and appeared on fog-shrouded country roads, began in the 1930s. In 1944, an Air Force pilot was en route to an isolated outpost en route to the Pacific when he inexplicably lost hours and reappeared at the same spot, but with nearly 2 gallons of fuel left, unexplained. He reported seeing a tall man wearing a hat and dark overcoat among the pine trees. The man asked for his license and disappeared. The pilot then heard, like a distant bell, several whistled musical notes. He swore he had recited the pilot's blessing, stepped back, and saw the figure again. Gray face, empty black eyes, the weather around him unstable, as if out of sync. Similar reports emerged in the 1970s claiming that legends of prisoners who moved to Oregon after serious convictions would return to haunt lost roads at night, following routines, walking near rusted truck beds, dragging chains, or leaning over abandoned cars on the shoulder. In 1983, a truck driver named Harold Green hit something and backed away. He recounted, "It looked like a man, but its limbs were distorted, as if its legs didn't belong here. He kept saying, 'They're coming,' and he disappeared when I tried to help him." In the 2000s, Hillary Martinez, a paranormal researcher, recorded EVP near the Antelope Creek Trail. Between flashes of white noise, she picked up a child's voice reciting, "On the other side, he waits." She collected nighttime photographs of pale orbs hovering among the trees. One video shows something running strangely, as fast as a deer, but with no identifiable shape. The most curious thing was when she sent the video to another experienced analyzer, who detected 0.03 seconds before the image, an ultrasonic pop, suggesting the abrupt activation of some unknown mechanism. Now, in the present, these stories are escaping from textbooks and infiltrating social media. On TikTok, the hashtag #OregonPioneerGhosts has racked up 2.1 million views. One video shows the shadow of a man standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by headlights, his shape distorted as it's filmed, but remains still when the headlights move. Dark tourism influencers offer midnight pioneer walks tours, promising to show where the pilot vanished in 1944, where the bell tolls, and what remains of the burned-out chapel. An episode of a Netflix series set in historic Oregon features a sequence featuring a tall figure in a trench coat, whose inspiration, according to the screenwriter, came from a true story from the 1860s, but without citing sources. The names and setting are masked, but the audience gets the point. The visual appeal fuels the myth. And here we come to a crucial point. Who is lurking in this forest? The masked figures of the pioneers? Vengeful spirits carrying secrets of disappearances and terrors? Or a kind of being that exists between worlds, constructed not only of human memories, but of traumas embedded in the earth, the water, the stones along the trail? In Prairie City, a 2018 survey identified locations with higher concentrations of phenomena: anomalous EMFs, sudden temperature drops, electromagnetic interference with equipment. Not only that, but residents reported experiencing similar dreams. Visions of a cross made of chains hanging from a pine cone, shades of gray becoming human, a silent scream that gathers in the chest before fading away. Local psychologist Dr. Laura Jenkins said that this type of dream, synchronized between unconnected people, signals that there may be an external trigger, such as a collective experience projected into the unconscious. This suggests that if something real is occurring, it is powerful enough to penetrate both the physical and mental realms. Now, decades later, we arrive at the present day, where the pioneer legend lives on in our imaginations and on camera. But the question remains, do these trails reach us by chance or instinct? Because Maggie Thompson of Ghost Hunters, Oregon believes not. Pioneers don't rest. They wait for someone to see. They wait to be remembered. Meanwhile, groups of ghost hunters are organizing to record what they call the Night Watch. Expeditions armed with thermal cameras, recorders, and EMF meters. They're searching for the original symbols from Jessica's cards. The supposed circular roofs manifest on makeshift platforms in the earth. Photos show circles marked by mud, as if someone had repeatedly rotated the place. These structures are believed to be portals or signs, still active. One of them stated, "It looked like an unlit altar. There was energy there, like a heart that stopped beating and now just doesn't bleed." And then, one night in June 2024, one of these groups disappeared near the old trail. Cameras captured muffled screams and dull metallic sounds. The team was found the next day, lying on the ground, disoriented, with no clear memory, and their clothes wet with dew, even in the middle of the night. In the grass near the bodies were small bronze chains, miniature images of people with blurred faces, and a single red chalk token with the symbol of a cutout moon, identical to Jessica's symbols. The expedition director declared weeks later, "I am convinced we were observed. Something changed when we walked beyond our stationary point. Something saw us as visitors, as predators, and marked us." Since then, the sites have been cordoned off by municipal order for an indefinite period. As the mist thickens and the rustling of pines mingles with the scent of damp earth and moss, the question remains: in these places where ancient stories lie, are there still unseen eyes watching over us? Are pioneers coexisting like ghosts, or something more ancient, perhaps predating all colonization? As dusk closes the narrative's door, the next twist is already in sight. We will explore how the two stories, New York and Oregon, begin to converge in the American cultural imagination. We will reveal films, music, art, and conspiracy theories where both figures intertwine. It is at this point that we will discover if there truly is a link between the vigilantes of the old world and the pioneers of the West, and why this surveillance, whether carried out by shadows or specters, remains ingrained in our culture. The stories of New York and Oregon, however distant they may seem in space and time, begin to weave a secret symphony of coincidences, patterns, and archetypes that overlap, as if pieces of a single, long disassembled puzzle. The intersection of these narratives emerges not only at the level of folklore, but in fragments of documented reality, lost records, hidden letters, marginalized works of art, and unexplained phenomena connected by symbols, dates, and a universal sense of surveillance. The first sign of interconnection between New York's Mafia shadows and Oregon's pioneering specters came in 1987, when a Portland librarian named Edgar Tillman was cataloging forgotten correspondence in an iron safe belonging to the Caldwell family, direct descendants of Jessica Caldwell. Among the letters, one intrigued by its signature, A. Mancini, dated 1934, sent from Manhattan to a J. Caldwell. The letter contained no visible content, just a blank sheet with a black wax mark, the same symbol found on the red chalk index cards at the Prairie City Museum, the moon crossed by a horizontal line. At the bottom of the paper, under ultraviolet light, a single sentence written in Italian was revealed, "Non siamo mai stati soli." We are not, and never have been, alone. The name Mancini immediately brings to mind the missing priest from New York, whose records had been considered classified until the 2010s. The connection between families who never crossed geographically, united by secret symbols, raises the possibility of a network that transcends crime or superstition, a network that may involve esoteric knowledge, ancient spiritual protection societies, or even a structure of intergenerational silencing. In 2002, conceptual artist Benjamin Harlow exhibited a series of canvases called The Gaze Cycle at an underground gallery in San Francisco. Each painting depicted figures in 19th or 20th century costume looking directly at the viewer, amid deserted landscapes, horizonless roads, and misty forests. One, titled Mulberry Echo, featured a faceless man in a pinstripe suit standing beside a dry oak tree. Another, Crossing Pines, depicted a woman in pioneer dress, facing a shadowed trail, her eyes glowing faintly. Both paintings had inscriptions on the back, a date, 1933 and 1867, and the symbol of an inverted cross with a bronze chain. The artist claimed to have based his works on dreams that had haunted him since adolescence, but he had no in-depth knowledge of the historical details of the real characters. Even so, the chronological and aesthetic coincidences generated a cult following who speculated about genetic memories, spiritual ancestry, and even the conscious manipulation of time as a concept. In music, compositions emerged that became cult favorites for their somber tones and coded references. In 2011, the indie band The Hollow Pines released an album called Watchman West East, with lyrics that mention men with dark faces that weigh down the sky, and paths traced in iron voices. The track Mulberry Prophecy repeats a line, "They walk in a light that is not ours," while the song Jessica's Chain sounds like a litany with dissonant chords and whispers interspersed in different languages. These cultural manifestations are more than artistic expression. They function as collective memory capsules, retelling fragments of legends in a new language. A 2015 University of Oregon study analyzed 150 dream reports of figures observing silently. 62% of participants reported feelings of recognition when seeing images of 1930s Mafia clothing or pioneer attire. Another 27% reported seeing the same symbols in dreams that appear on the documented objects: the cutout moon, the chalk token, the chain cross. In parallel, scholars at Columbia University analyzed letters from former members of the Italian Mafia who claimed to belong to an inner sect of the Mano Nera circle, called La Guardia Morta. According to reports, this group engaged not in executions, but in spiritual protection, conducting secret rituals to maintain the balance between lost souls and the world of the flesh. One of the rituals described spoke of nighttime vigils in caves, where green flames were lit and saints' names were chanted backward. The sect's records mention journeys west to guard the path of the innocent who walk without light. One entry from 1936 reads, "We went to Oregon, where the old voices meet the new. There, where the trail whispers, we buried the seal of the covenant." This line leads us to another curious document, a map found on the wall of an abandoned chapel in Medford, Oregon. Hand-painted and dated 1871, it shows a trail branching off into the forest, with two eyes at the dividing point. The eyes are stylized as black circles crossed by thin lines, and next to them is the symbol of a cross and chain. The map was discovered in 1992 during renovations to a community center, and has since been studied by cryptographers and historians. The recurrence of symbols suggests communication between groups that, officially, would have no way of knowing each other. This opens the door to the hypothesis of a parallel, almost subterranean culture that resisted historical erasure and used symbols and rituals to perpetuate its traditions under the guise of religion, crime, or pioneering. In 2023, an independent documentary called Who's Watching You gathered testimonies from historians, former mobsters, descendants of pioneers, and paranormal researchers. One of the interviewees, Alice Mancini, stated that her great-grandfather kept a bronze hourglass identical to the one that belonged to Jessica Caldwell in a safe. She only discovered the object after his death. Interestingly, the hourglass was accompanied by a piece of paper bearing the following phrase, "When eyes close, they pass through." For Alice, this meant that the surveillance of others did not cease with death, but intensified in the liminal state between life and oblivion. The documentary also showed never-before-seen footage from Jessica's complete diary, digitized in 2021. On one of the last pages, there's a hand-drawn drawing. Two figures, one in a dark suit, the other in a light dress, holding hands before an iron gate. Behind them, eyes in bushes and a broken tower. The caption below reads, "He came from the east, she from the west. They united to contain the sleepless." Comparing the dates of unexplained disappearances between New York and Oregon throughout the 20th century, a pattern emerges. A cyclical wave of occurrences every 11 years, alternating between the east and west coasts. In 1944, the pilot disappeared in Oregon. In 1955, the New York archivist who was searching for the Black Book died. In 1966, an entire family disappeared near the John Day River. In 1977, an unsolved attack on the crypt of St. Michael's Church. These events continue to this day, always marked by visions, symbols, and witnesses who claim the same thing. They were being watched. All of this leads us to question whether these entities, shadows, or whatever they may be, are part of a single consciousness. Something that runs through the spine of the country, shaping its history through forgotten corners, through marginalized culture, through the eyes of those who could never tell all they saw. Pop culture has not ignored this hypothesis. Films like The Silent Cross, Out West They Wait, and The Watchers of the Ridge explore figures who traverse eras and places, always observing, influencing, and manifesting themselves where fear and faith collide. And now, at this point in history, with documented symbols, accumulated cultural coincidences, and interconnected historical patterns, a new question arises. What if the division between New York and Oregon was never real? What if the figures represent not two forces, but two aspects of the same entity, one that takes shape as time, geography, and local culture dictate? The truth, like the hidden eyes that permeate these stories, always seems to be one step beyond the visible. And the most disturbing thing is not what we see or hear in these legends, but what we feel when the air stops moving, when the light seems different, and when something watches us without us knowing why. The next section will take us even deeper. We will explore the foundation of the first unrecorded pacts between mafia families and pioneer clans, buried letters, objects found on both sides of the country with the same inscriptions, and above all, how modern culture, from artificial intelligence to algorithms, has begun to replicate the same patterns and symbolic structures of these ancient entities. They didn't disappear, they just changed shape. History is never limited to what is recorded on paper. Often, the most crucial events remain on the margins of official documentation, rooted in hushed pacts, sealed not by ink, but by oaths and fear. The intertwining of the shadowy figures of the New York Mafia and the ghosts of Oregon's pioneers not only transcends time and space, but also seems to obey a code that survives through cultural layers, passing unnoticed by the hasty eyes of conventional history. In 1902, a set of letters was found under a loose board at the Salem State Library in Oregon, written in archaic Italian and dated 1889. The messages were addressed to a man identified only as Il Custode dell'Ovest, or the Guardian of the West. The well-preserved handwriting matched another set of documents attributed to Domenico Bellini, a former advisor to the Genovese crime family in New York, whose records consistently pointed to a mystical figure responsible for keeping the balance in places where blood met silence. These letters described encounters with entities in dense forests and the fear that certain rituals activated the eyes of the earth. One passage in particular stands out. They do not speak, but they demand payment. Where a brother was buried without confession, there they watch. And where blood mingles with moss, the night has no end. This type of cryptic language resembles not only pioneer legends from Prairie City, but also accounts preserved in the oral traditions of native groups in the region, which spoke of entities that thrived on human suffering and fed on undisclosed secrets. In 1921, a Baptist pastor named Elias Graham, a resident of Ashland, reported receiving nocturnal visits from a man who asked him, always at 3 a.m., to light the chapel's old lamp and pray for a specific name. The detail that caught his attention was that the name mentioned in these prayers, Vincenzo Moretti, corresponded to an Italian mobster who disappeared in New York in 1894, whose body was never found. Years later, during excavations on the grounds of the former chapel, archaeologists discovered a human skeleton wrapped in a cloak with symbols burned into the hem, a chain entwined with roots. This event not only revived interest in connections between the two regions, but also rekindled the theory that Eastern crime families had established hidden roots through the early settlers, using the pioneer trails to transport more than just goods. They carried messages, relics, and objects considered cursed or sacred. One such relic was discovered in 1939, hidden inside a stone wall on an abandoned farm outside Burns, Oregon. The object was a massive iron cross, inscribed in Latin and Sicilian, wrapped in oil-dark cloth. When state researchers cleaned it, they discovered the names of 3 cities engraved on it: Palermo, New York, and John Day. This geographical connection pointed to an ancient route, invisible to ordinary maps, but traced by those who shared a code of silence older than any official law. In the following decades, rumors began to surface about a secret society known only as the Watchers of the Covenant. References to them appear in scattered criminal testimonies, records from religious institutions, and even manuscripts hidden in university archives. According to these sources, the Watchers were responsible for ensuring that certain events were not revealed to the public and that specific objects remained hidden. Their actions, always discreet, involved disappearances, silencing, and interventions in investigations deemed dangerous. The existence of such a society is fueled by accounts such as that of Gregory Shaw, a Yale University historian who, in 1974, published an essay entitled Paths of Death and Silence. In his text, Shaw details his research on Italian immigration routes that coincided with disused pioneer trails. According to him, repetitive symbols, such as the slashed circle, the inverted cross, and the closed eye, were found on stones, marked trees, and old buildings on both sides of the country. Shaw disappeared in 1975 during an expedition near Bend, Oregon, and his body was never found. What was found was his notebook, with a final underlined sentence: "They keep what we forget, and exact what we forget to promise."